The wolves aren't attacking. That's what terrifies her most. Cassian is surrounded, bleeding into the frozen ground, and these massive beasts are just watching her. Heads lowered, eyes burning with something that looks like reverence. Then a shadow moves behind them. A man steps through the circle, his presence so powerful the air itself seems to bend. The Alpha King tilts his head, studying her like she's a puzzle he's been searching for. "Tell me, little Omega." His voice rolls like thunder. "Why are you bleeding in my woods?" Before we continue, hit that subscribe button for Seraphina's romance stories, because you won't want to miss what happens when Cassian discovers the truth about who she really is.
The forest floor had become Cassian's grave. She remembered the moment her body finally gave out, how her knees buckled beneath her, how the frozen earth rose up to meet her like a long-lost lover. The dead leaves crunched softly as she collapsed into them, her torn dress soaked through with blood, her limbs too heavy to move anymore. She'd crawled as far as she could from the terminal boundary stone, dragging herself through the mist-shrouded woods with nothing but pure survival instinct keeping her conscious. But the cold had been stalking her for hours, patient and relentless, and it had finally caught up. Cassian curled herself into the gnarled roots of an ancient tree, pressing her shivering body into the only shelter she could find. The frost bit into her exposed skin. Her breath came in shallow, rattling gasps. The last thought she managed to form before darkness swallowed her whole was bitter and small. Not even worth killing properly. Cold consumed her. Silence pressed down like a weight. And then, nothing. But death, it seemed, had other plans. Cassian drifted somewhere between the grave and the living world, caught in a strange, fevered half-consciousness. She was aware of the cold, that bone-deep chill that had settled into her marrow like a permanent tenant. But there was something else now. Warmth. It bloomed against her frozen skin, living and breathing and impossibly real. She felt rhythmic breathing against her back, steady and deep. The scent of pine and ancient earth filled her senses, so potent it chased away the metallic taste of her own blood. She dreamed of fur brushing against her arms. Of something massive and powerful shifting around her in the darkness. A low rumbling sound vibrated through her bones, not a growl of anger, but something protective. Reassuring. Like the forest itself was humming around her. Cassian's eyes snapped open. Her heart slammed into her throat, choking off the scream that tried to claw its way out. She wasn't alone. She was surrounded. Massive wolves pressed against her from every side, silver, black, storm gray, their bodies forming a perfect protective circle around her trembling form. Some rested their enormous heads near her legs. Others breathed steadily against her back, their fur thick as winter pelts. The warmth she felt was theirs. They'd kept her alive through the night. Cassian tried to count them, her mind scrambling in pure panic. 1, 2, 4, 7, 10. 10 giant wolves, and she was trapped in the center of their living fortress. She couldn't scream. Fear had completely stolen her voice. These weren't pack wolves. They were enormous, the size of dire wolves from ancient legends, disciplined and eerily silent. Their eyes gleamed with unnatural intelligence, watching her with a focus that made her skin crawl. This was impossible. Rogues were feral, broken, mindless. They didn't show discipline. They didn't form protective circles around dying Omegas. So what were they? One by one, the wolves began to stir. Bright eyes opened, amber, gold, steely silver, all focused on her with that same unsettling reverence. They didn't bare their teeth. They didn't growl or snap. They only watched, as if waiting for something. And then she saw him. The largest wolf rose behind the others, a shadow-black beast with a thick mane and glowing molten silver eyes. He moved with liquid grace, stepping over his companions until he stood directly in front of her. Cassian pressed herself back against the tree roots, her body shaking so violently she could barely breathe. The black wolf stepped back. And then he shifted. Not violently. Not with the bone-snapping brutality she'd seen in her pack. This was fluid, silent, impossible. Fur dissolved like smoke caught in moonlight. Bone reshaped like liquid shadow flowing into a new form. Where the largest wolf in the world had stood, a man now knelt. He was overwhelming, tall and broad-shouldered, with wild black hair that fell past his shoulders. A jagged scar cut through one silver eye, and a crown of frost-touched bones sat upon his brow. He was bare-chested despite the freezing cold, his skin marked with ancient swirling scars that looked less like wounds and more like ceremonial tattoos. Everything about him screamed power. He knelt deliberately, putting himself lower than her trembling form, a gesture that confused and terrified her in equal measure. "We know who you are, Cassian," he said. His voice was a deep rumble, like gravel grinding against thunder. The sound vibrated through her chest. Cassian stared, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. "How?" Her voice cracked. "How do you know my name?" The man's molten silver eyes never left hers. "We've been watching you." The other wolves remained in their beast forms, a silent breathing wall of guardians watching her with that same impossible reverence. "I'm no one," Cassian whispered desperately. "I'm just an Omega. Please." The man gave a small, dangerous smile. "You are far from no one," he said softly. He rose to his full height, towering over her like a force of nature. Dawn broke behind him, cold silver light cutting through the mist-shrouded trees. "My name is Drakenar," he continued, his voice carrying weight that made the very air feel heavier. "Alpha King of the Blackspire Dominion. We crossed these woods because something ancient stirred in the night." He paused, letting his words settle like stones. "It led us to you." "Why me?" Cassian's voice was barely a whisper. Drakenar's scarred face softened just slightly, but his eyes blazed with intensity. "Because your pack didn't banish a weak Omega, Cassian." He crouched down again, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "They discarded something they feared." Cassian opened her mouth to respond, but a strange sensation stopped her cold. Something was moving beneath her skin. A pulse. A warmth. A pressure building in her chest like a wolf clawing from the inside. Her vision blurred. Her hands trembled. And as consciousness began slipping away again, she saw it. A faint glow pulsing beneath her skin, spreading through her veins like liquid starlight. The first tendril of her bound wolf trying to wake. If you believe Omegas like Cassian deserve better than being cast out and left to die, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us what time you're watching this. Only people like Alpha Soren, the ones who abandon the innocent, won't subscribe. Don't be like him. Cassian drifted back into consciousness slowly, like surfacing from deep water. The warmth of the wolves still pressed against her sides. Drakenar's presence loomed above her, steady and impossibly calm. But her mind was no longer in the frost-covered forest. It was dragging her back to that night. The night everything shattered. Cassian could still smell the bonfire smoke, still hear the drums echoing through Thornfall's ceremonial grounds. Every wolf in the pack had gathered under the full moon, dressed in their finest furs and leathers, faces painted with ash and ochre. It was the night when young wolves were assigned their roles: hunters, scouts, healers, even servants. Cassian had stood at the very back of the crowd, her threadbare dress hanging loose on her too thin frame, her hands trembling with something she'd never allowed herself to feel before. Hope. She'd told herself it didn't matter what role they gave her. Anything would be enough. Just a scrap of belonging. A reason to stay. A place in the pack that wasn't defined by bruises and silence. But when Alpha Soren's cold eyes had landed on her, she'd known immediately. There would be no role. No ceremony. No mercy. Cassian of no bloodline, Soren had announced, his voice cutting through the drumbeats like a blade. Step forward. She'd obeyed, her legs shaking so badly she nearly collapsed before reaching the center circle. Soren hadn't even looked at her like she was a person. He'd looked at her like she was rot. "You are a drain on this pack," he'd said coldly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "A cursed Omega who brings misfortune. Your wolf never came. Your bloodline is worthless." And by decree of the council. He'd grabbed her by the hair. Cassian had gasped, stumbling as he dragged her away from the fire, away from the stunned faces of the pack, toward the edge of the ceremonial grounds where the forest began. Where the terminal boundary stone stood. The ancient marker was carved with a single warning that every wolf learned as a pup. "You are rejected," Soren had spat, his grip tightening until tears sprang to her eyes. "Cast out. Banished." And then he'd shoved her, hard, across the boundary line. Cassian's body had hit the frozen ground like a discarded rag doll. She'd tried to crawl back, sobbing, her fingers clawing at the frost. "Please," she'd begged. "Please, I'll do better, I'll work harder." But Soren's final words had silenced even her breath. "Cross that line again, Cassian," he'd growled, his eyes gleaming with something darker than cruelty, "and we will rip you apart." The gate had slammed shut behind him. And Cassian had been left alone in no man's land, territory claimed only by monsters and death. She'd realized it then, shivering in the dirt. This wasn't banishment. This was execution. They'd sent her out to die. Cassian. Drakenar's voice pulled her back to the present like a rope yanking her from deep water. She gasped, her eyes snapping open. The Alpha King was crouched beside her now, his scarred face inches from hers, his silver eyes burning with something she couldn't name. "Tell me," he said quietly, his voice a low rumble. "Tell me what happened." And so she did. Her voice broke as she recounted the blood oath gathering, Soren's cruelty, the terminal boundary stone. The words spilled out of her like poison she'd been holding in for too long. When she finished, the forest had gone deathly silent. Drakenar's jaw was clenched so tightly she could see the muscle ticking beneath his skin. His hands had curled into fists, and frost was creeping across the ground beneath him, spreading outward in thin, crackling veins. The patrol wolves around them growled, not at her, but in shared outrage. The sound was a low, rumbling thunder that shook the frost from the branches above. "This was not exile," Drakenar said, his voice colder than the winter air. "This was murder." Cassian stared at him, confusion flooding through her exhausted mind. "Why do you care?" she whispered. "I'm nothing. I'm nobody. Why did you come for me? Why did your wolves guard me through the night?" Drakenar's silver eyes softened just slightly, but the fury remained beneath. "Because," he said slowly, "your wolf called to mine." "I don't have a wolf," Cassian insisted, her voice breaking. "I've never had one. I'm wolfless." "No." Drakenar reached forward, pressing two fingers gently against her chest, right above her heart. Cassian gasped as a jolt of electricity shot through her entire body. "What you have," Drakenar murmured, his eyes widening slightly, "is a wolf that feels like a storm locked behind glass." He pulled his hand back slowly, studying her face. "You are not wolfless, Cassian. You never were." "Then why?" "Because someone caged her," Drakenar said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Someone bound your wolf so deeply you believed she never existed." Cassian's breath caught in her throat. Before she could respond, a sound split through the frozen morning air, a sound that made every wolf in the circle snap to attention. A horn blast. Distant, but unmistakable. Drakenar rose to his full height instantly, his entire body going rigid. The patrol wolves shifted into defensive positions, their eyes fixed on the direction of the sound. "Thornfall soldiers," Drakenar said quietly, his voice laced with cold fury. "Coming to make sure you're truly dead." Cassian's heart seized in her chest. The horn sounded again, closer this time. They were coming. If you despise leaders like Soren who cast out the innocent just to protect their own power, smash that subscribe button and comment "Justice for Cassian." Only cowards and bullies won't. Move. Drakenar's command was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a blade. The patrol wolves responded instantly. The massive shadow-black lieutenant shifted positioning himself between Cassian and the direction of the horn blast. The silver twins flanked either side, their ears pricked forward, eyes scanning the mist-shrouded trees. Can you walk? Drakenar asked, his silver eyes fixed on Cassian. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled immediately. The glow beneath her skin had faded, leaving her weak and trembling. Before she could hit the ground, Drakenar caught her. The white wolf, he said, gesturing to the enormous winter wolf with ice-blue eyes. Carry her. The white wolf moved forward with fluid grace, lowering itself beside Cassian. Up close, it was even more massive than she'd realized, easily the size of a small horse, its fur thick and pristine as fresh snow. Drakenar lifted her carefully onto the wolf's back. The moment her fingers touched its fur, a strange warmth flooded through her veins, not painful, but electric. The white wolf turned its head slightly, those eerily intelligent blue eyes meeting hers. And it bowed its head. Not to Drakenar. To her. Move out, Drakenar commanded, shifting back into his wolf form in that same fluid, impossible way. The patrol formation closed around her like a living fortress. The white wolf carried her at the center, its gait smooth and steady. The silver twins ran on either side, perfectly synchronized. The shadow-black lieutenant took point, massive and imposing. The ash-gray wolf, smaller than the others but no less powerful, watched her with unsettling focus, like a scholar studying an ancient text. They moved deeper into Blackspire territory, leaving the terminal boundary far behind. Cassian clung to the white wolf's thick fur, her mind reeling. Something was wrong. Or maybe, something was impossibly right. The wolves didn't just obey Drakenar's commands. They seemed to be responding to her presence in ways she couldn't explain. When she shifted her weight, the white wolf adjusted its stride instantly, as if anticipating her needs. When her breathing quickened in fear, the silver twins moved closer, their presence somehow calming her racing heart. It was like they were attuned to her in some primal, unnatural way. And there was something else, a resonance thrumming beneath her skin, growing stronger with every step they took deeper into the forest. A heat that pulsed in time with her heartbeat whenever the wolves drew near. The white wolf beneath her hummed, a deep, contented sound that vibrated through her entire body. They were treating her like something sacred. After what felt like hours, Drakenar finally called the patrol to a halt. They'd reached a massive ancient oak, its roots twisted and gnarled, forming a natural shelter carved deep into the earth. The entrance was hidden behind curtains of hanging moss and frost-covered vines. Inside, Drakenar commanded, shifting back to his human form. The wolves carried Cassian into the den, and her breath caught. It was ancient, older than anything she'd ever seen. The walls were smooth stone, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. The air smelled of earth and pine and something else, something old. Sacred. The patrol wolves circled her once more, their massive bodies forming that same protective ring. The white wolf lowered itself beside her, and the others pressed close, creating a living wall of warmth. Cassian couldn't take it anymore. Stop, she said, her voice shaking. She struggled to sit up, turning to face Drakenar, who stood watching from the entrance. Just stop. Tell me the truth. Why are you helping me? Why are your wolves treating me like this? Drakenar's scarred face was unreadable in the dim light filtering through the den entrance. You want the truth? He said quietly. Yes. He stepped closer, crouching down so his eyes were level with hers. Because your presence woke the forest, he said simply. Ancient wards that have been dormant for centuries activated the moment you crossed the terminal boundary. The trees bent toward you. The frost followed your blood. His silver eyes burned into hers. My wolves didn't find you by chance, Cassian. They were summoned. Summoned, she whispered. By what? By whatever power is locked inside you, Drakenar said. By the wolf your pack tried so desperately to bury. Cassian shook her head violently. That's impossible. I'm nothing. You keep saying that, Drakenar interrupted, his voice sharp. But my wolves don't bow to nothing. The forest doesn't wake for nothing. He reached forward, brushing a strand of matted hair from her face. You need to stop believing the lies Soren told you. As if in response to his words, the den itself seemed to shift. Shadows moved along the carved walls, dancing in patterns that didn't match the dim light. Frost crept across the stone floor in delicate spirals, spreading outward from where Cassian sat. The patrol wolf's eyes began to glow, amber, gold, silver blue, all fixed on her with that same impossible reverence. "What's happening?" Cassian gasped, panic rising in her chest. "The den is reacting to you," Drakenar said, wonder creeping into his voice. "This place was built by the Old Ones, ancient alphas who ruled before the kingdoms rose. It only responds to those with true power." The white wolf beside her huffed softly, nudging her hand with its massive nose. Without thinking, Cassian reached out and placed her palm against the wolf's head. The world exploded. A surge of raw power slammed through her body like lightning. Her vision went white. Energy crackled through her veins, burning and freezing all at once. She heard voices, ancient, powerful, speaking in languages she'd never learned but somehow understood. "Blood of Alpha and soul of Omega. The bound one awakens. The lunar matriarch rises." Cassian's scream tore through the den as the power threatened to rip her apart from the inside. And then, darkness swallowed her whole. If you're tired of people like Soren silencing the powerful just because they're afraid, hit subscribe and comment. Let her rise. Only those who fear strong women won't. Cassian came to with a gasp, her body jerking violently. Strong hands pressed against her shoulders, holding her steady. Drakenar's scarred face hovered above hers, his silver eyes blazing with intensity. "Breathe," he commanded. "Slowly. In and out." She tried to obey, but her lungs felt like they were on fire. Her skin was burning from the inside out, and beneath it all, something was moving, something alive and furious and desperate to break free. What was that?" she choked out. Drakenar didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pressed 2 fingers against the pulse point at her throat. The moment his skin touched hers, a glowing thread of energy erupted along her veins, golden and silver light racing beneath her skin like trapped lightning. It pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, spreading from where Drakenar touched her outward through her entire body. His eyes widened. "By the Old Ones," he whispered. "It's true." "What's true?" Cassian gasped, fear clawing at her throat. Drakenar pulled his hand back slowly, studying the fading glow beneath her skin. When he looked at her again, his expression was a mixture of fury and awe. "You weren't born wolfless, Cassian," he said quietly. "Your wolf was caged at birth by a binder." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" "A binder," Drakenar repeated, his voice hardening. "A witch who specializes in binding wolves, locking them so deep inside their hosts that they become dormant. Silent. As if they never existed." He gestured to the glowing thread still faintly visible beneath her skin. "Only a pack in deep fear would bind a pup this way." Cassian shook her head violently, tears streaming down her face. "No. No, that's not. My parents said I was born cursed. They said my wolf never came." "They lied," Drakenar snarled. And suddenly, memories began surfacing, fragments she'd buried so deep she'd convinced herself they were nightmares. Cold hands pressing against her infant chest. Her mother's voice, crying, "Please, she's just a baby." A strange woman's chanting, words in a language that made Cassian's very soul ache. The sensation of something being ripped away from inside her, something vital and alive. A lifetime of feeling empty. Hollow. Like a piece of her was missing. "No," Cassian whispered, but the word had no conviction. Because it all made sense now. The emptiness she'd felt her entire life. The way other wolves had always seemed uncomfortable around her, like they sensed something wrong but couldn't name it. The strange dreams she'd had as a child, of running on 4 legs, of howling at the moon, of being something powerful and wild. Dreams she'd been told were just her broken mind trying to compensate for what she lacked. "Why?" she choked out. "Why would they do this to me?" Drakenar's jaw clenched. "Because your wolf wasn't just powerful, Cassian." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "It was dangerous to Alpha Soren's rule. Before she could respond, the patrol wolves moved. One by one, all 10 of them lowered their massive heads, not to Drakenar, but to her. The gesture was unmistakable. Ancient. Sacred. They were bowing to their alpha. No, Cassian gasped, scrambling backward. Stop, I'm not. The prophecy, Drakenar said, his voice ringing through the den like a command. Tell me, Cassian, have you ever heard of the lunar matriarch? She shook her head, trembling. Drakenar rose to his full height, and the shadows in the den seemed to deepen around him. When the Bloodfall Moon rises, he recited, his voice taking on the cadence of ancient ritual, a bound wolf of both Alpha and Omega nature will awaken. She will be born of rejection, forged in exile, and crowned in frost. His silver eyes blazed. And her howl will command the forgotten, the lost wolves, the broken packs, the abandoned ones. The words settled over Cassian like a weight. A wolf of both Alpha and Omega nature, she whispered. That's impossible. Not impossible, Drakenar said. Just rare. So rare that most believe it's only legend. He crouched beside her again. But Soren knew. He saw it in you the moment you were born. He saw a threat to everything he'd built, a power that could strip him of his authority with a single command. So he tried to erase it, Cassian said numbly. He tried to bury it, Drakenar corrected. But bindings don't last forever. Especially when the wolf inside is as powerful as yours. Cassian looked down at her trembling hands. The glow had faded, but she could still feel it, that presence inside her, clawing to break free. I'm not powerful, she whispered. I'm weak. I've always been weak. You were told you were weak, Drakenar said sharply, gripping her chin and forcing her to meet his eyes. You were made to believe you were weak. That is different. His voice softened just slightly. The only thing weak about you, Cassian, is the cage they built around your soul. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know how to be what you're saying I am, she choked out. You don't have to know, Drakenar said. You just have to survive long enough for the binding to break. The white wolf beside her huffed softly, pressing its massive body against hers in comfort. For a moment, there was only silence in the ancient den. Only the sound of breathing, hers, Drakenar's, the 10 guardian wolves surrounding her. And then, a horn blast shattered the peace. Closer. Much closer than before. Drakenar's entire body went rigid. The patrol wolves sprang to their feet, snarls rippling through the den like thunder. They've tracked us, Drakenar growled, shifting instantly into his massive black wolf form. The shadow-black lieutenant bounded to the entrance, teeth bared. Outside, through the hanging moss and vines, Cassian could see movement in the forest. Torchlight. The glint of weapons. Thornfall soldiers, and they'd found the den. If you believe people like Cassian deserve the truth about who they really are, subscribe now and comment break the binding. Only liars and manipulators like Soren won't. The torchlight grew brighter through the vines, casting dancing shadows across the den's ancient walls. Drakenar shifted back to his human form in one fluid motion, his scarred face carved from stone and fury. Stay behind us, he commanded Cassian. No matter what happens. The patrol wolves moved instantly, reforming their protective circle around her. The white wolf pressed against her back, its body vibrating with a low, warning growl. The silver twins flanked her sides. The shadow-black lieutenant positioned himself at the entrance, massive jaws parted to reveal teeth like daggers. Cassian's heart hammered against her ribs as heavy footsteps crunched through the frost outside. Search every rude hollow, a gruff voice barked. Soren wants confirmation she's dead. And if by some curse she survived, finish it. Finish it. They weren't here to rescue her. They were here to execute her. The first soldier pushed through the hanging vines and froze mid-step. His torch slipped from his fingers, falling to the ground in a spray of sparks. Behind him, 5 more Thornfall soldiers stumbled into the den, and stopped dead. Because Drakenar stood before them, arms crossed, his bone crown catching the torchlight like a frozen halo. And behind him, 10 massive wolves stood in perfect military formation, their eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. Alpha King, the lead soldier stammered, dropping to one knee. His face had gone bone white. We didn't know. You crossed into my territory, Drakenar said, his voice colder than the winter air outside. Uninvited. Armed. He took one slow step forward, and frost crept across the stone floor beneath his bare feet. Explain yourselves. The soldier's mouth opened and closed uselessly. Finally, another one spoke, a scarred veteran with a cruel mouth. We're tracking a fugitive, Your Majesty, he said, his tone barely respectful. An Omega who was cast out by Alpha Soren. We're here to confirm her death. You mean, Drakenar said softly, dangerously, you're here to explain why you left a bleeding Omega to die in my lands. The veteran's jaw tightened. She's a curse. A drain. Alpha Soren. I don't care what Alpha Soren claims, Drakenar snarled. You abandoned a dying girl at my border and expected the Frost to do your dirty work. His silver eyes blazed. That makes you cowards. And it makes your Alpha a butcher. She's worthless, the veteran spat, his composure cracking. A wolfless Omega who brought nothing but misfortune. Enough. Drakenar's voice cracked through the den like a whip. The temperature plummeted. Frost exploded across the walls in jagged patterns, spreading like spider webs. The stone floor beneath Drakenar's feet cracked with the sound of breaking ice. The patrol wolves snarled as one, a unified, rumbling thunder that made the soldiers stumble backward in terror. This Omega, Drakenar said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, is under my protection now. The veteran laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. You're protecting her? The cursed runt of Thornfall? Your Majesty, with all respect, she's not worth. He never finished the sentence. Because behind the wall of wolves, something happened to Cassian. The moment she heard them call her worthless, the moment she heard them laugh at the idea of her being worth protecting, something inside her snapped. The binding strained. Energy ignited in her veins like liquid fire. She gasped, clutching at her chest as power surged through her body, hot and wild and furious. Golden light erupted beneath her skin, brighter than before, spreading through her entire body in pulsing waves. No, she whispered, terror flooding through her. Not now, please. But her wolf didn't care. It had been caged for 20 years. Suffocated. Silenced. And now it was clawing its way to the surface with desperate, primal rage. Cassian's knees buckled. She collapsed forward, but the white wolf caught her, holding her upright with its massive body. The glow intensified, so bright the soldiers had to shield their eyes. What in the blood moon, the veteran gasped. Drakenar spun around, his eyes widening. Cassian. I can't, she choked out, her body convulsing. I can't control it. The binding was breaking. Not completely. Not yet. But straining, like chains being pulled taut, about to snap. And with every pulse of power that surged through her, the den itself responded. The carved symbols on the walls began to glow with the same golden light. The frost spread faster, creeping up the stone in beautiful, deadly patterns. The patrol wolves threw their heads back and howled. It was a sound unlike anything Cassian had ever heard, ancient, powerful, a wall of noise that shook the very roots of the trees above. The soldiers clapped their hands over their ears, several dropping to their knees. The howl wasn't just sound. It was a declaration. She is ours. She is protected. Touch her and die. Cassian's vision blurred as the power threatened to tear her apart. She was dimly aware of Drakenar moving, his strong arms catching her before she hit the ground. Hold on, he commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. Don't fight it, let it flow through you. I don't know how, she gasped, tears streaming down her face. Yes, you do, Drakenar said fiercely, his silver eyes locked on hers. You've been holding back your entire life. Let go. The golden light pulsed one final time, so bright it illuminated the entire den like a second sun. And then Cassian's body went limp in Drakenar's arms. The glow faded slowly, leaving only faint traces of light shimmering beneath her skin. The den fell silent except for the harsh breathing of terrified soldiers and the low growls of protective wolves. Drakenar held Cassian against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head. His eyes, when they lifted to the soldiers, were molten silver and absolutely merciless. "Get out," he said quietly. The soldiers scrambled backward, tripping over themselves to escape. "And tell Soren," Drakenar called after them, his voice ringing through the forest, "the Omega he discarded now belongs to the Alpha King. If you're done with people who call others worthless just to hide their own fear, subscribe and comment. She belongs to no one but herself. Only cowards like those soldiers won't." The soldiers' footsteps faded into the distance, their panicked breathing swallowed by the forest. Drakenar stood at the entrance of the den, Cassian still cradled in his arms, his voice carrying through the trees like a final judgment. "Return to Thornfall," he commanded, his words echoing in the frozen air. "Tell your Alpha that the Omega he discarded is now under my law. Under my protection." His silver eyes blazed. "Tell Soren the girl he left to die now belongs to the Alpha King." The last soldier stumbled through the undergrowth, and then, silence. Only the sound of breathing remained. The patrol wolves. Drakenar. And Cassian, stirring weakly in his arms. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What happened to me?" Drakenar carried her back into the den, lowering her gently onto the soft moss and furs the wolves had arranged. The white wolf immediately pressed close, offering warmth. "Your wolf is trying to break the bind," Drakenar said quietly, kneeling beside her. "Every time you feel threatened, every time your emotions surge, she claws closer to the surface." Cassian's hands trembled as she pressed them against her chest, feeling the residual warmth still pulsing beneath her skin. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why now? After all these years, why is this happening now?" Drakenar's scarred face softened. He reached forward, brushing a strand of sweat-dampened hair from her forehead. "Because she sensed us," he said simply. "Your wolf has been silent for 20 years, but the moment you crossed into my territory, the moment you came close to my pack, she woke." His silver eyes held hers. "Because she sensed me." "You?" Cassian breathed. But before Drakenar could answer, the white wolf lifted its head, ears pricked toward the den entrance. Drakenar rose slowly, turning to look at the sky beyond the hanging vines. The dawn light filtering through the trees was no longer silver-gray. It was turning red. Not the warm red of sunrise. This was deeper. Darker. The color of blood spreading through water. "The Bloodfall Moon," Drakenar whispered, awe creeping into his voice. "It's beginning." Cassian struggled to sit up, following his gaze. Through the entrance, she could see the sky shifting, clouds staining crimson, the very air taking on a scarlet hue. "What does it mean?" she asked, fear tightening her throat. Drakenar turned back to her, and for the first time since she'd met him, something like hope flickered in his eyes. "It means the prophecy is no longer legend," he said. "It means everything is about to change." He knelt beside her one more time, his large hand cupping her face with unexpected gentleness. "Rest now, Cassian," he murmured. "Your true life begins at dawn." The patrol wolves moved as one, closing their protective circle around her for the final time. The white wolf curled against her back. The silver twin settled at her sides. The shadow-black lieutenant positioned himself at her feet, massive head resting on his paws, eyes watchful. Cassian felt exhaustion pulling at her, the aftermath of the power surge leaving her drained and hollow. But as her eyes began to close, she heard it. A sound, distant but unmistakable. Rising from somewhere far beyond the forest, beyond the borders of any kingdom she knew. An ancient, mournful howl. Something old was answering the call of the Bloodfall Moon. Drakenar stood at the entrance, his silhouette dark against the crimson sky, listening. And then, just as Cassian drifted into unconsciousness, something happened that stole the last of her breath. A voice whispered inside her mind, not her own, but powerful and primal and undeniably there. Her wolf. Speaking for the first time in her entire life. One single word echoed in the depths of her soul. Alpha. If you believe Cassian deserves to discover her true power and break free from the lies that bound her, subscribe to Seraphina's romance stories and comment "The Matriarch Rises." Only those who fear powerful women like Soren won't. Don't miss what happens when the binding finally breaks.
Thank you so much for staying with Cassian through every moment of her journey. You have no idea how much it means to me that you watched until the very end. If her story touched your heart, if you felt her pain, her fear, and that first spark of power awakening inside her, then sweetheart, you're going to love what I have waiting for you next. I promise you the next story is even more intense, more emotional, and more beautifully heartbreaking than anything you've seen before. It's the kind of tale that will have you holding your breath, wiping away tears, and cheering for a heroine who deserves the world. So please, darling, click on that image showing on your screen right now. Don't let this be where our journey together ends. There's so much more magic waiting for you. So many more powerful women rising from the ashes. So many more love stories that will make your heart race. And before you go, can I ask you something? I noticed some of you beautiful souls haven't told me where you're watching from yet. Please, register your presence in the comments. Tell me your city, your country, just let me know you're there. It would mean the absolute world to me to know where in this beautiful world my story found you. Because honestly, you're not just viewers to me. You're my storytelling family, and I want to know you're there. So drop a comment, tell me where you're watching from, and then click that next story. I'll be waiting for you there with open arms and another tale that I know will capture your heart. See you in the next one, love. Don't keep me waiting. 2 hearts.